Welcome back. This is episode 3 of Counseling Tips for Pastors and Ministry Leaders, a podcast hosted by the nonprofit iHope Christian Care and Counseling. And this podcast is all about equipping and encouraging all Christians who are in ministry. That might be formal, you're a pastor, you're getting a full-time salary. That might be ministering to your next door neighbor or even your kid in the other room. Every Christian is in ministry. And so because our goal at iHope Christian Care and Counseling is first and foremost to offer counseling and coaching services, that's what we do on site, but beyond that, to build up God's kingdom through equipping pastors and other ministry leaders so that when you are connecting with someone, you can not only share the gospel, not only get to know that person, help that person meet that practical need, but you can also be mindful of and speak into or help with any possible mental health or relationship struggles. So I know I'm not making you a professional counselor. That's not the goal. But we are glad that you're here. And today we are going to tackle the topic of depression and give a few tips for how to recognize if someone is struggling with depression. Now, I said this podcast is hosted by the iHope Center, and I'm the director. My name is Jessica Hayes. I'm a licensed counselor and marriage and family therapist in the state of South Carolina. And depression is probably one of the top 3 things that brings people into counseling. Now, this might be meaningful to you because you wonder if you are struggling with depression. That's a very real thing. But regardless of how big or small your ministry is, at some point you are definitely ministering to someone who is struggling with depression. And we see depression all throughout Scripture. It's a very common thing. Probably the most famous or popular verses are in the Psalms, in Psalm 42 and 43, where they're praying, "Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me?" And I'm not going to break down that psalm. That's a fascinating thing to look at, of how does the psalmist cry out to God and experience the hope of the Lord. But what I want to share today are some counseling tips for things you might notice as a ministry leader that would lead you to maybe raise that flag in your mind and say, maybe I should follow up with this person. They might need some more support. And then in our next episode, we'll talk about, what do you do? Okay, maybe that flag got raised, but now what? What can you do? But let's focus right now on some of those red flags or risk factors or warning signs that you might notice. And again, you might notice it in yourself, and in which case, reach out, seek help. You are absolutely not alone if that's something you're struggling with. The number one place I recommend for people is to call 988, kind of like 911, but for mental health. It's the suicide prevention lifeline. They have a lot of resources and support and encouragement. And that's just something to have in your back pocket for yourself or for someone else. But some of those really common warning signs that even someone on the outside, a pastor, a friend, a neighbor, a youth group leader, someone might notice. Do you notice someone withdrawing or isolating themselves, maybe taking a step back from activities that they used to engage in? Are you noticing some new mood swings? Right? Maybe even in one conversation, or maybe just over the course of time, like they just seem a little unpredictable with what their mood would be like. Are they starting to act more agitated, just kind of restless or anxious? There's a lot of links between anxiety and depression. So it might look like someone is getting really sad and hopeless. And yes, those are some warning signs, but you might actually notice, excuse me, you might actually notice on the other side more agitation and behaving kind of recklessly. So a change in mood or a change in behavior. Now, certainly if you're talking with someone and they are talking about feeling hopeless, feeling like they want to die, feeling like they're trapped or they're a burden, or I just can't take it anymore, I'm in so much pain, Those are some really common phrases or versions of those that should absolutely raise a flag for all of us. Definitely, that's not the time to run away. That's not the time to let your phone interrupt you. That's the time to sit down and say, whoa, let's talk about that. And again, in our next episode, we'll talk more about what to do. But consider that a warning sign. Pay attention if someone is actually talking about these kind of feelings. You also might notice, is someone giving away prized possessions? People sometimes, if they're thinking about hurting themselves, they start trying to make amends with people or, reaching out to mend past wounds. They're giving away things that are important to them. They're leaving more mementos for people, which makes sense. You see that with people who have cancer or a terminal illness. And we sometimes see it with people who are feeling depressed and thinking about ending their life. So pay attention to those things. And also just some risk factors. Not everyone going through these situations is dealing with depression by any means, but it kind of raises the stakes a little bit. It raises the likelihood if someone is dealing with a divorce or a chronic illness, a new serious health issue, cancer diagnosis, something like that, a big job loss, or really any kind of significant hard event in their life. The death of a loved one, a divorce, or a serious issue in their family, a new health crisis. Again, does that cause depression? No. But it certainly stirs the waters for really difficult emotions. And so noticing maybe that combined with, and now this person is giving away all their favorite books to people that they care about and their mood is just really up and down. Well, I'm not saying you're a counselor. I'm not saying you have to sit down with them and solve the problem, but you also don't want to ignore those warning signs. And the last few things I would highlight are a change in substance use, increasing, especially alcohol use or drug use, having trouble getting out of bed, having trouble meeting their daily life activities, they're missing work more often, or they're missing Bible study or church, and maybe there's always excuses. But when you start to notice these type of patterns, don't just let it fall to the side. Don't just assume it's no big deal. Gosh, they must be stressed. Someone else will deal with it. You might be the person God has put in their life to help them deal with it. And so this is just a word of encouragement that if you are in that boat, you're not alone. The Lord knows exactly what they're dealing with, exactly what they're thinking about, what they're struggling with, and He will equip you and help you if you are the person in front of them who's noticing these warning signs. So I want that to be an encouragement to you, but I also want to equip you so that you don't feel blindsided when things like this come up. And in our next episode, we'll talk through a few things you can do if this were to happen, if you do start to feel a little concerned for someone. And so I know that will be very practical and tactical. So make sure to subscribe to the show, of course, counseling tips for pastors and ministry leaders. You might even want to copy the link to the show and text it to a friend or send it in an email. Recommend it to your pastor or someone that you know who is in ministry, which, P.S., that's all of us. Every Christian is in ministry to one degree or another. And leave a written review, leave that 5-star review. That encourages us. You can tell us what topics you want us to cover, and it helps just kind of get the word out there. And then I'll close by just reminding you that this is a podcast hosted by iHope Christian Care and Counseling, which is a 501c3 nonprofit in the state of South Carolina. We offer counseling and coaching services. So if you are in the state, if you're semi-local, we would welcome you to make a referral or to reach out for some support, to consider making a donation. You can find all of it at our website, ihopeflorence.com. We rely on donations to keep our client fees low and affordable. And so we are a charitable organization in the state of South Carolina. and reach out. We would love to hear from you, to be praying for you, to support you, and definitely to tackle the topics that are most helpful for you when it comes to mental health and relationship struggles in your ministry. So we'll be back next time with some practical ideas for what to do if you're worried about depression. And so I'll talk with you then.